Welcome to Fan for Racing Radio. We are here for our Hot Topics Sound Off, and joining me for tonight's show is Jay Huseman. I am Sharon, Fan for Racing. And first of all, welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you. Been a big night as far as covering the racing already, and look forward to some hot topics here. I know we got a couple we talked about earlier in our preview shows, so hopefully we get some fan interaction. I know we're still building the platform here at Fan for Racing on YouTube, so if you're watching, start subscribing, liking, getting notified, and tuning in.
All right, I've got the live chat screen up so I can keep an eye on that in case anybody chimes in with some thoughts on their end. And Jay, I'm going to let you kind of kick this off. Where do you want to start with hot topics?
Well, I think we need to start with COTA. After we talked about what a great race it was, both on the Xfinity and Cup side. There is the possibility, being that a new contract, that's not the right word, but contract signed as far as coming back for one or multiple years, that they just wrapped up. So do we see COTA come off the schedule next year?
Well, I hope not. I hope that COTA stays on the schedule. I think that NASCAR has found the sweet spot as far as the size of the track, the configuration, and everything else. We saw some good racing in both the Xfinity Series as well as the Cup Series, and I think it would be a shame if they took it off the track, Jay. I just think that we need to keep COTA on the schedule and let these drivers continue to learn that track, and especially this new configuration. I think the only spot is that turn one. Turn one seems to be continues to be the problem spot. But other than that, I think it's been a great track. What do you think?
Yeah, it has, and I think Austin is a good market. I know we also have Texas Motor Speedway, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I know it's on Sirius XM. He was talking about that. They spaced it out this year. COTA a little bit earlier in the schedule, given that gap before they get to Texas Motor Speedway in a few weeks. So I think NASCAR did a great job working with that. And again, this is all speculation, just on the fact that there isn't the contract signed for races beyond 2025. But I don't see it going away. I didn't see Chicagoland going away either, or Road America. So that's not to say it can't. But I'd be really interested, and I hadn't heard anything as far as what would replace it. So like I said, I don't see it going away. I think it's just a matter of it hasn't been signed yet. And I'm with you, Sharon. I certainly hope that it doesn't. I think it is one of the better road courses we've had, and they tweaked it of keeping the cars bunched up and in front of the fans more by shortening the track by a mile. The big thing with that again, they're listening to the fans. I know a big thing is under caution. It took, I'm trying to remember what the time, 4 minutes and something, or up to 5 minutes for one lap under caution. Taking away that mile, I think it was down to 2 something. They're 3 something. So they're listening to the fans. They're trying to still provide entertainment and passing zones, making it a maneuverable track. Because otherwise you get, like you said, they try too hard and dive bomb turn one, that there were 6 wide there in turn one.
Yeah, that turn one, we had another lap one incident between Chase Briscoe and Ross Chastain. And I know Ross has taken a lot of heat for that, but it's one of those turns that everybody bunches up in that corner and everybody's going for that real estate. I really can't blame anybody for wrecking in that first corner.
Listening to Dave Moody today, it was kind of interesting of, Ross, like you said, Ross taking the blame for it. And yeah, he dove under Chase Elliott, got into Chase Elliott, but there were 4 more cars there that put themselves in that position. So who's to blame for them? You get inside of one car, okay, if somebody else is out there 3 and 4 wide, well, they made their own decisions, and the chain reaction bound to happen. So is that really then on Chastain for taking out however many. I think Denny Hamlin was maybe involved in that one. It at least got some damage there as well. So I get it. This is one of those, Sharon, where I don't mind the bump and run. I think that one was a little aggressive, especially on lap one. I know you got track position so vital, and they talked about that with the shorter track that may amp that aggression up, because now track position is so much more important because you have less track to work with. So there was some talk about that prior to the race. I little extreme though, like I said, on lap one.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting start to the race, no doubt about it. Everybody's anxious to get started. Everybody's going into that first turn, and it's just one of those turns that it's a very sharp turn, and so all these cars kind of slow down, and everybody catches up, and you've got a googly gop of cars all in that turn. Trying to go for the real estate to get around the turn and be out there first. And you can't fight for the same real estate with that many cars and think that nobody's going to come out without some kind of an incident. So, and of course, we did see that. There was the incident, unfortunately, it was Chase Elliott that was the recipient of getting banged up in that first lap. But he recovered. He did end up with a top 10 finish at the end of that race. So if they can learn how to maneuver that first corner without everybody piling up in there, I think it would make the race even better.
You definitely got to give some huge props to HMS and the number 9 team. I think they said in the last green flag run, he went from 21st up to 4th. Is what that final run was for Chase Elliott. So huge shout out to him in the recovery, like you said. It took some strategy after that. Let me ask you this, Sharon. Is it a matter of who was involved? On the aggression side, you have Ross Chastain, has that stigma attached to him now. On the receiving end, it's NASCAR's most popular driver, Chase Elliott. Does the amount of uproar change if this is 2 other drivers, not NASCAR's fan favorite and not, and I'll go back and use an example real quick of even when we were talking about Coast and Hocevar at Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Kyle Larson took out Austin Cindric, who possibly had the best car, one of the best cars throughout the race. Nobody said boo about that. It was, he made a mistake or misjudged it or racing happens,
I think that's an excellent example because you're right. It happens all the time on the track. People don't do it intentionally. There's a lot of reasons why those kind of incidents happen. Sometimes there's the accordion effect, which is what happens in turn 1. You've got all these cars slowing down to make that turn and everybody else catching up to it, and you get that accordion effect. And the next thing you know, you've got a bunch of cars all piled up. I thought we were fortunate to just have one car that had an issue coming out of that. But you're right. I think you take NASCAR's favorite driver, the fan favorite. He's always the most popular driver of the year. And then you throw in Ross Chastain, who has built a little bit of a reputation as being a hard driver to pass, very competitive, very aggressive. And I think everybody was being aggressive in turn 1. I don't think Ross Chastain was the only driver being aggressive. He just happened to be the one that was near Chase Elliott at that time. So you combine that with the reputation that he has for being aggressive, and everybody's got a complaint about it. But if they look at it objectively, there were a lot of cars in that situation. Yeah, he did take a nosedive in there. And I will say this for Ross Chastain, making that nosedive, and I know they're all doing that. They're all trying to get into that first place spot. Turn 1 is probably not the spot to make that happen.
Well, and especially not on the start of, that they're that bunched up because you're on a restart or on the initial start. So yeah, I'd have to agree with you of maybe later in the race and they're two, maybe three wide or in a group of three or four, not that extreme then. So there again of it, not just who was involved, but maybe the timing of it, lap one. I know for Crate Racing USA, the race director there says it every time. I've heard Larry McReynolds use it a couple times, but the race director there tells him at the start of every race I've ever heard him on, you can't win it on lap one, but you sure can lose it.
Yep, that is the truth. And if every driver would just remember that, lap one is the lap where you can lose the race if you're not careful. And again, I don't think it's a lack of respect in all cases. I do think that it's an over eagerness to try to get out there and out front. And we talked about it in the preview show, Jay, that it's the cars that start up front that end up winning this race. It's very seldom that a car wins this race from the back of the pack. Now we saw Connor Zilic in the Xfinity Series race get that pit road penalty. He went all the way to the back and raced his way back through the field. But it's not easy to do at a track like Circuit of the Americas. But I like that phrase. You can't win it in the first lap, but you can sure lose it in the first lap. And you can also recover if you do have an incident, because Chase Elliott did end up with a top 10 finish. So I do think that I think all the drivers need to use more prudence when entering 10-1 on lap one, because again, they were not the only two drivers that were doing that in that first turn on the first lap. If you look at the replay, you'll see a bunch of drivers all piled up in that turn. And I wonder if we need to change the restart zone at COTA. I think it might help the situation. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jay?
And they had backed it up and made an adjustment. Maybe they do need to more when it comes to that. Especially again of now how they're going to have the shorter circuit, and there again of as we've seen in any, I think about the Roval, or not just the Roval, the one at Indy, the Indianapolis road course. That was one where they did it, and I believe they did it at the Roval at Charlotte too, if I'm not mistaken, for that reason of having that kind of packed massive pack coming into that first turn. So one of the questions I have, if we want to transition into it then though, and it kind of feeds off of just that scenario, but you mentioned it, and Sharon, I think you actually were able to watch the Xfinity Series race, correct?
Yes.
So you mentioned Connor Zilic getting the pit road penalty coming from the back. I heard him talk about it on the radio that he bumped some people, to include teammates. So there again I didn't hear the uproar from fans on social media and calling into the radio of him being too aggressive, but Ross Chastain gets tagged for it. Carson Hocevar gets tagged for it. So is it a matter of that being a fan favorite then in Connor Zilic?
Well, and it's the same answer as I had before. I think it does make a difference on when fans complain. If there's a fan favorite, Connor Zilic has a certain thing that kind of follows him as well, reputation that follows him as well, because he's excellent on the road courses. He's raced in the IMSA and sports cars, and he does very well on the road courses. He's come over to NASCAR, and he's racing the road courses here, of course. In the Xfinity Series, his debut in the Cup Series didn't go quite as well, but he's got a reputation of being a good racer, and so I think people forgive him a little bit for his aggressiveness. But one of the reasons he is successful is because he is aggressive on the racetrack. So same thing with Ross Chastain. Same thing with Carson Hocevar. They are aggressive drivers. We're not saying that they need to lose that aggressiveness. I've always thought, when you talk about the difference between being aggressive and being assertive, being aggressive is when you're violating the rights of others. Being assertive is when you're standing up for yourself without violating the rights of others. So I think that is one way that the drivers might think about it is, can I do this without ruffling feathers? Do I have that space, or am I going to take the chance? It's a risk versus reward, right? Am I going to get the reward with little risk, or is this a big risk and maybe no reward in the end if you end up wrecking? So those are the things that are learning curves for a lot of drivers, and some drivers kind of learn how to finesse it. Some drivers never establish that finesse. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you hit on two things there, or one thing I wanted to address, that is the risk versus the reward. You've heard a driver say, well, I got to do what I got to do to win. Well, you didn't win. And I'm not picking on Carson Hocevar, but the way it rolled out, he didn't win. So, whereas Connor Zilic did. SVG is another one that certainly can rub fenders with the best of them, as we've seen, but doesn't seem to take anybody out either. That's a big difference in what, you and I, when we talk about it, the bump and run versus the dump and run. So I think that's a big factor. I will say this, after the race, Connor Zilic said, hey, I got some apologies to make, to include to my teammates. Obviously he felt worse about his teammates than anybody else, but he did say, hey, I know I used some people up and I'm going to have to go make some apologies. Versus Carson Hocevar's was the standard, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to win races. But again, you didn't win, so you got to work on that part as well. And like I said, I'm not picking on him. That just happens to be this week of who it's been involved with. This has been going on since NASCAR's been around, obviously. You go back to the days of Dale Earnhardt. And I know I used some references there, but one thing I will say this of the style of racing, the atmosphere, the overall attitude in the garage area has also changed and evolved from that. So when you go back that far, you got to remember back then it was a little bit different era and style as well.
Yeah, that's true. It was a very different era. It was a very different style of racing. NASCAR is trying to change kind of some of the culture within the NASCAR world with regard to bringing a car that is supposed to level the playing field. And I do think that, the drivers, it's highly competitive. Let's face it, when you're racing in NASCAR's top series, it's highly competitive. All of these drivers are talented. All of them are doing their very best for their sponsors, for their team owners. And I don't think anybody is intentionally going out there and playing bumper cars, which is one of my favorite analogies, to what sometimes happens. It did look like bumper cars in turn one on lap one at Circuit of the Americas. And I guess that's, you're at the top level of the sport. Let's act like we're at the top level of the sport and that you are premier drivers in this sport. When you have pileups like we saw lap one, turn one at Circuit of the Americas, I don't think it reflects that these are premier drivers with a lot of talent. And if we can just kind of take it easy in the beginning of this race and let everybody get by that turn one. I know everybody's wanting to be up in the front, but you've got a whole race in order to make that happen. And we know it can happen. Choose your place to make your move. Turn one is not the place to make that move.
And there again, Sharon, I want to feed off what you said. That was something I remember thinking, but I hadn't brought up until you just said something. Connor Zilic, 18 years old in the Xfinity Series. Yes, he's got a lot on his resume already, but coming into the NASCAR ranks is in the Xfinity Series, which is, if you will, a little bit of the learning area versus if you're at the Cup level. Now, I know Carson Hocevar came from the Truck Series, jumped right into Cup. He's not a rookie. Last year was his rookie year. This is his second year. So that was something I know that does factor in a little bit as well, that people saying, well, he's the rookie in the Xfinity Series. I get that. There is certainly something to be said for that, of as they come through one of the lower series, that's where you kind of get that, I hate to say it, but get it out of your system. Learn and get it out of your system. And some of them don't. They do still carry it up to the Cup Series, at least to start their career. And that's where I referenced a lot of drivers we've seen, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, several that a year or two before they really settled in. Even I think go back to, and I'm getting into that older era, but Tony Stewart had some issues in his first year or two, but also won some races in his rookie season. So we'll see how it develops, and we've seen several drivers grow out of it. So I think we're in good shape. I like the aggression, but there definitely is that line that we saw, and I know last year NASCAR drew the line with Austin Dillon and said that was not acceptable.
Yes, that was definitely a crossed line there. I just want to say too that Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain, I want to get back to that. A lot of times people will say, well, I heard Chase Elliott say this on the radio, and or I heard so-and-so say this on the radio. Please keep in mind that what they say on the radio is far different sometimes than what they say after they've seen the race footage. So keep in mind, on the radio, they're in the heat of the moment. There's emotions that are involved there. And I know professional race car drivers do try to keep their emotions in check, but they're human beings. So there's going to be some emotion there. And sometimes they don't always know the bigger picture until after they get out of the race car and they see that race footage. So just because they said something on the radio, give them time to see the race footage and then respond, give them some cool off time, if you will, and then respond before we use that as an example of somebody did something wrong.
Yeah, and I know there too and I guess watching some of the stuff on social media today of there at the end, one of the spots that Chase Elliott gained was Ross Chastain, because his spotter said, hey, Chase is coming and he's going to take you out. So Ross Chastain, knowing that Elliott had the faster car at that point and he was just trying to hold on, actually did kind of pull over and let him go, if that's true. So kind of a, hey, I know I was in the wrong there. You're working your way back to the front. Yeah. So maybe saved himself there of being taken out of maybe not finishing. I'm trying to look where he finished. Yeah, finished 12th. But it could have been worse if he'd tried to hold Chase Elliott up. Could have possibly been even worse of a day. So these drivers, again, can make smart decisions at times, if you will. But you mentioned it of when something happens, and I think about it of if I'm at home or doing something, things I say, whether it be out loud to myself or to my dog, well, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to tell this person that. We don't necessarily carry it out. It's that vent, and that driver being penned up in the car, hot and irritated. Obviously, things aren't going well. That's their only release, is that push to talk button where they get to talk to their crew chief and their team. Yeah, some things are said that, they probably have no intention of carrying out or whatever, consider saying in another setting. It's just, that's their immediate vent and frustration release. before, like you said, especially if like you said, they don't even know for sure what happened, that they see the footage and they're like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't react off of what I thought.
Yeah, and Chase Elliott actually said that after his incident, and he was talking to the media. He said, "I really haven't seen the footage, so I can't really comment on it." And he didn't until he did see the footage. But yeah, and I can see where he was upset about it. I can see where he might think that he owes Chase Elliott one, but Ross Chastain won, but Ross did kind of give him one there during the race. So they know when they've kind of overstepped, and they're willing to give and take. And I like that too. And I think we saw that with this particular incident.
Well, and I think back to Chase Elliott. I think is one of those that has a good big picture mind. Go back to the situation he had with Kevin Harvick a few years back at Bristol, and then when they got to the playoffs, Chase wasn't looking to repay him back, because Chase made it into the playoffs and Kevin Harvick didn't. He said, "Your season's done. I'm on my way." Was it Mary playoffs or something, because he was out. So that's a big factor too. You may say, okay, I do owe him one, but is it worth it to create a season-long feud that could cost me playoff spots down the road?
Yes, indeed. Okay, are we done with this one, Jay? Do you have another one on your list?
Yeah, I got a couple actually. Speaking of being hot under the collar, I saw the initial report of Brad Keselowski needing to be treated after the race. Get some IVs put in him. Word I got was not only power steering failed in the car, but his cool suit failed. So it was extremely hot. And that's one of those, it's not like we've seen a rash of them, but there have been a couple situations with that. You're talking about risk versus reward. I know a lot of teams have gone to these cool suits, but if they fail, now you got all this extra weight and water on you in this cool suit. And if it's hot, it can boil. And I don't know if that's the case with Brad's or if it was just the fact that it didn't work, but it can have a great negative effect if it fails again, if you're getting that hot and that water is more detrimental, then obviously it would have been good if it was working. So what's the risk versus reward there with these cool suits in the event they don't work properly?
Safety is a priority. So I would think, is NASCAR issuing those cool suits, or is this something that the teams do on their own?
No, I don't know that that's a mandatory or even an encouraged thing. It's just an option. I think Jimmy Johnson was one last year that talked about that. Of once he tried one, he was definitely in favor of it. But again, it does add weight and issues, like I said, of if it doesn't work.
Right. I think they need to continually evolve to a better place with that cool suit, because this is not the first time we've seen this happen, where a driver gets out of the car, and in this case, they moved him on a stretcher to the medical center on site, and he was released. But I'm sure they had to give him fluids and kind of refresh him considerably before he was able to be released. I think that they need to really look at and continually look for improvements with that cool suit, because when it fails, it's a dangerous situation, I think, for those drivers. And we got to think safety first. So I don't know who's responsible for evolving that cool suit. But I would think, as a driver, I would be insisting upon it and wanting a better backup. If the cool suit fails, what's the backup for me as a driver?
Yeah, and I don't know enough about them. And I was thinking that as you were saying that, well, maybe I can get involved and come up with a way and make some money of how to help them. But one thing of thinking outside the box of, if it isn't working properly, if there's a way you can drain the water out of it so it's not then the water a release valve of, okay, well, let's get the water out of it. Now it's just a suit. But you're right. And like I said, it's not like we've seen a major ton of them happening, but one or two where it's causing that kind of problem and that dehydration to that level where a driver needs immediate attention. And like you said, they stretchered him to the infield care center. He did get some fluids and all, and is doing good from what I heard today. But one or two has to make you sit up and take notice. Just think about why we have the safer barrier. One or two incidences. Okay, it's not a bunch of them, but one or two is enough to say, hey, we need to do something. Different parts on the car, when we talk about that, of how the car's getting airborne. One or two incidences, and they're going to be like, hey, we need to fix this. So I'm with you. Hopefully the companies involved there, as well as the teams, like I said, if they got input of, hey, we got to have something where we can reset it. I don't know if it's exactly how. Like I said, I'm not exactly familiar with how it connects or something, but to be able to adjust so that it isn't then harmful the rest of the way.
Yes, and thankfully Brad Keselowski made it to the end of that race. But imagine if it was the 600 at Charlotte and it was a 90-degree day or a 100-degree day, and they were racing in those conditions, and the cool suit was no longer operating. There's got to be a way that they can have some kind of a backup plan for these drivers, whether it's releasing the water that could potentially boil or somehow getting them into an alternate system that does work when the original fails. Because to me, that's unacceptable. Imagine if he passed out on the racetrack while he's driving. That could end up in a serious injury for himself and perhaps others. So I think this is serious enough that they really do need to put a priority attention to coming up with a backup plan.
And some of that, I think, does need to involve NASCAR with this next-gen car and the way they're sealing the cars off with the window nets and everything else. I know last year a couple of times they had the temperature, the thermometer there on the driver's seat. I mean, these cars are getting really hot and there's no air getting in them by any means. So that might be something that NASCAR needs to look at, of how can we build something into the car that is keeping it at a little bit cooler temperature as well. I know for the safety factor of the car getting airborne, you don't want air getting in and lifting from inside the car. That's one of the reasons they're trying to seal it off. But there again, have you gone too far where it's too compact in the car where there's no air getting in, and that's causing problems for the drivers, and they're having to go to these cool suits to try and counter that. And now if they're failing and it creating then twice as much heat in there, finding a middle ground of maybe, I'm trying to think of a fan or something, and I'm sure drivers aren't looking, or teams aren't looking to have another fan or something in the car. But I mean, like I said, if that's the option, like you said, what's the backup? If the cool suit fails, what's the backup plan? It may need to be some type of external fan or air conditioner in the car of some sort.
Or another source of water that's cool, that's kept cool, refrigerated in some way, or whatever. There needs to be some kind of backup refrigeration for that water.
Well, and I think going back old
battery, why not backup refrigeration? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I said. I can't really talk to that because if just like your helmet blower, I mean, you'd have to stop under a pit stop of how they can, if it fails, there's no way to fix it. I really don't know. But I was just thinking of it, going back to a little bit of old school. They just used to give them an ice pack, and drivers would put them inside their chest. But then as they melted and water came down and got into their seat, at that time were just the steel seats, and that water would heat up, that they were getting blisters on their butt, because that water was boiling. There too, you got to evolve. And I understand that and like I said, that's going back before technology was involved in it. It was just a baggie of ice. but there were drawbacks to that as well. And as they found that out, they had to do different things. So I think there are some things to look at to continue to improve. I understand nothing's ever going to work perfectly all the time, but like you said, there's got to be a backup of where it can't be a major risk then either.
Absolutely. Okay. One thing that I wanted to kind of talk about, because I wanted to get your thoughts about this, there was some conversation I heard on Sirius XM radio today about there was confusion by the drivers over which turns were going to be officiated, if you will, on the track. The drivers are told one thing in, I guess, their drivers' meeting, and yet on the track, it seemed like something different happened. I can't give you the exact specifics, but why wouldn't they officiate all of the corners? I know it probably takes a lot of staffing in order to do that, but the drivers were confused over which corners were going to be officiated. They thought it was going to be thus and such corners, and it ended up being entirely different corners. So how can NASCAR fix that? They need to fix that because it created a lot of confusion, I guess, for the drivers. Did you hear anything about that?
I did hear about it, and this is one that we may have to come back to, because I'm with you. It's and I didn't get to watch the Cup race yet to see the coverage or where they're talking about it. From my understanding, it was that they did tell him in the drivers' meeting that, and I don't remember the exact corner numbers, but that one of them wasn't going to be under that rule of, and now I can't even think of the name of, getting off the track. I can't think of the term. Can't think of the term they were using, but
well, usually it's all four wheels have to be over the line.
Yeah, but there was a term that went with it, the shortcutting or whatever they were calling it. But anyway, for some reason there was one corner that there were rumble strips, but that one wasn't going to, that rule wasn't going to be applied to that one. And from what my understanding was, there is because there was a little more runoff room outside of the rumble strip. So it wasn't really shortcutting the track and there was room to the outside. That was my understanding of it. That may not be true, but I did hear that conversation throughout the day. You're right, on Sirius XM. But from what, and I think I heard it on the morning show with Mike Bagley and Pete Pistone, they said, though, that was briefed to them in the drivers' meeting.
Right.
Now, why that one was not, and the confusion as to, okay, why is that one not? I understand. I'm with you. I'm like, if there's rumble strips and it's, it's either all or nothing. As to that, but for whatever reason, so NASCAR did brief them on that, but it still lends that or opens that door to confusion as to, okay, why this section? But that, like I said, that's what I heard was there was runoff room outside of that, and it wasn't really then shortcutting. If you were going to go outside the rumble strips there, you're making the track longer, not shorter.
I see. Well, and I guess the problem for me, or the issue that I saw, is that the drivers were confused. And when the drivers are confused over which turns are being officiated and which turns are not being officiated, that's never going to be a good thing. So NASCAR needs to give it to them in writing or something so that they know and can put that up in their car or whatever. Their crew chief has it or their spotter has it. Everybody should have that and know which corners those are, so that there's not this mass confusion that seemed to happen at Circuit of the Americas.
Well, I'll take, just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, I'll take the other side to that. The team that knows the rule and takes advantage of it. And I know you'll appreciate this. Go back to the qualifying for the All-Star race with Frankie Stoddard and Jeff Burton.
Yes.
You knew where I was going with this, didn't you?
I did. I knew.
Okay. I mean, he followed the rules. They had to pit once before the checkered flag. He did it on pit road where they didn't wait until after the white flag came out, and everybody was like, oh, he didn't do his pit stop. He's not going to be the legal winner. Came down pit road, Their pit stall was before the start finish line. They made their stop and then just rolled across. So yeah, so if that's an area where they said, okay, you can and aren't going to get penalized, and a couple of teams were doing it, and everybody else was like, hey, they're doing it, I thought that was illegal. They're in confusion. This team's on point and knows the rule and taking advantage of it. I hate to see, like you said, there were some drivers, and I think Kyle Busch was one of them that they played some in-car audio from today that was questioning why, of having seen another driver do it and wanting to know why they weren't being penalized. And that was what the answer came back was, that corner isn't under those rules. So you're right. There were some teams and drivers, and obviously Kyle Busch and Jeremy Bullen's a good team, almost won the race, to not understand that maybe there wasn't as clear as what NASCAR thought it would be when they briefed it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that is the takeaway here. It wasn't as, sometimes you can say something and it's clear as a window for you, but it's about as clear as mud for the person hearing it, and they don't always get it. So that further clarification, I think, was necessary at the drivers' meeting. And it's always easy to say that with 2020 hindsight. I get that. But I think it's just something that NASCAR needs to be aware of, and I'm sure that they are, and we'll look at it, and that clarification will happen the next time. If it's COTA or whatever racetrack they're at, as far as a road course, that needs to be crystal clear to everybody.
And it's one of those, because I related to of say Atlanta. And I wouldn't have remembered that from years past, of when they went to the super speedway style of racing, that they put a double line up just like they do at Daytona and Talladega. So this year, watching that race, I heard them talking about that, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was there. To me, that would be no different of, okay, turns 1 and 2, it's not as steep a banking, so although the line's there, you can cross it in that corner. Again, you get into the heat of the race and the action of that, trying to figure out if you're in the right corner or not.
Yeah.
I'd rather it be of, hey, that one's not as big of a deal, but we're still going to have the rule just so it's consistent in all of it, and you're not that, or I guess maybe paint the curbs a different color of, this color curb doesn't apply. I mean, that's a thought. That's a thought there as far as that, but
yeah, that's a good thought, but. There needs to be so that there's no questioning that on the racetrack. Those questions need to happen before the racetrack. What else is on your list, Jay?
Well, I had one more thought there of, and I know again of how much of an advantage of you're trying to maximize everything you get by hooking the corners and hugging those curbs, getting 2 tires over them, as long as it's not all 4. My thought was just like on the last lap restarts of whether or not it finished under green, quit wrecking, just. So here I was thinking, just tell the drivers to stay on the course. Don't go off the course, period. But I know, like I said, that they're going to use up every inch and quarter inch they can. We've seen that when it comes to the rules as well. So. Yeah.
And Kyle Busch, by the way, I was noticing his line. His line was spot on when he got himself up to the lead there. I really liked the line that he had in some of those corners. And I've got another one.
All right, go ahead.
We talked about the 2 crew chiefs or the 2 teams that had penalties, pre-race penalties at Daytona. Well, we finally got to see exactly what it was. NASCAR showed the hydration bags from Daytona, and man, that was those were blatant penalties or blatant violations.
In this day and age, and first off, again, you're right, NASCAR had the parts out there. Everybody got to look at them. I know there was some concern about that of, if you're showing everybody what was done, it might give them ideas on how to try and go about it. But I think they're doing the right thing and going back to this like they used to in the old days of show the parts, let everybody look at them and say, we're catching this. I'm not sure how they caught it because that is some old school stuff. From what I read up on it, in the hydration bag, which is a bag where your water bottle goes and is to keep it cool, there's wiring in it, and they were putting in lead instead of the wiring. They were putting in lead of adding weight there. I think back to, I think it was, yeah, the ballast. That's right, because the penalty was listed as unsecure ballast, which to me, I think last year, what was the one, Ryan Blaney, or the year before, of just a bag of weight? It's not always just a block like we think of when I think of ballast anyway. But it's one of those, it really caught me off guard that this was even attempted in this day and age. I know it was obviously really sneaky. It's in the water hydration bag. On one hand, I like it. I like the fact that they were thinking and trying to be creative, and it goes back, gives you that old school feel. But also a little surprising because you're talking about in this day and age, you get caught, they're going to penalize. I think it was 10 points. And we've been talking about that. 1 point can make a huge difference. Yes. This was a 10-point penalty. So that risk versus reward, whether that couple pounds, I don't know if it ever gave a weight, but I know last year 5 pounds cost Alex Bowman the playoffs. So, is that worth it? Because the playoffs is $1 million worth of payout money.
To me, it's not worth it. I mean, to me, of course, that's not the way I play, but I know that these guys are looking for every competitive advantage they can get. But what kind of surprised me when you looked at those bags, how could they not miss it? I mean, they filled up every part of that area where the wires were going through. That was completely packed in with the ballast. And it added some serious weight to the car for sure.
And like you said, we talked about with Alex Bowman, and that was one because Hendrick opted not to try. And I said, I can't remember the crew chief that was on. He admitted, he said as soon as they got their first pit stop, they would lower the jack bar to lower the rear end, knowing that post race they had a tolerance, and what they were doing was getting it closer to that tolerance, and then hope that they didn't get hit in the rear end that caused more, because then they were going to be outside of it, So, and I think about pit road speed limit's 55. They'll give you up to 60. Drivers, teams are going to set it at 59.9. I mean, they're already using up. You can't say, oh, well, we were only a tenth over. No, you were 5 1/10 over, because you used up your entire margin just to get that close. So,
and if you get caught, we do that on the highway, don't we? I set the cruise on 5 over.
We're live. I don't think I want to discuss my driving in public here. No, you're right, and that's the big thing I look at then. Is if you get caught, accept the penalty. And obviously these two teams weren't either one appealing those. Provides a good story because, like I said, I found it kind of funny, just the throwback and the thinking of how creative they're being and how much it matters. I think back to a few years of pinholes in the back to allow air through, pinholes in the tires to release air pressure. I think that was one that involved Ryan Newman or his team. Not that the driver is the one doing it, but
I mean, at RCR too.
That was when Ryan Newman was still with RCR. Yep.
Yeah.
But how important any little thing like that is, that gives just that little bit of an advantage. It's so tight in racing. We're talking about 1 point on the track. You're talking about 1/10 as far as speed, because that's how tight it is. When we watch, I was just talking to somebody about this, of the aerodynamics of the side force on the car. The jackman that was hip checking the car to put a dent in the car a couple of years ago. Yep. And it's like, that was, and after watching the replay, it's not something I would have picked up on right away. But when NASCAR said, hey, we saw you, and they showed a replay of it, you could tell that was definitely an intentional hit with his hip, that they were doing it for a reason. Once it, again, I was focused on it. Yeah, just in general, I wouldn't have picked up on it. But that's how smart these guys are.
Yes.
Having that second layer under the wrap. Joe Gibbs Racing had something where they had modified and then put the wrap over it and got caught. I mean, they're still trying these things, and I know, Sharon, you're not a fan of that era of if you're not cheating, you're not trying, but they're still at it.
They're still at it, and I know NASCAR is enforcing it because they showed us what they found, and it is definitely illegal. So again, I know they're hoping that somehow they can get by with whatever it is they're doing, but this was a pre-race inspection that they found this. So I think it was pretty obvious that it was there. NASCAR obviously noticed the weight and started looking for where it was, and they found it. And that's why these penalties were handed out at Daytona. And I know in the case of one of the teams, and right now it's escaping my mind which of the two teams involved, but I know one of the teams said whoever they lost was it did hinder them during the race. And because sometimes I know we do talk about that and we really wonder how much of a hindrance it is because they can still talk via the phone and so forth.
I was going to see if I could find that real quick. I want to say one of them was Todd Gilliland in Front Row Motorsport. Here we go. Give me a second. I'm trying to get it pulled up. This is where they got the pictures of it. So let's see. Crew chief, the number 34 and the number 51, Rick Ware Racing then.
Cody Ware.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Cody Ware. And you're right. In a case like that of the Rick Ware Racing, they don't have as many team members as some of the others do. So it is the bigger impact for them. I don't know if that's one you're talking about. I'm not. This one doesn't have either the drivers.
This is Todd Gilliland's team.
Yeah, this one just
did feel the loss.
This one just gives the two car numbers. It doesn't have the crew member that they ejected. Yeah, the car was the 34 and the 51, which was Todd Gilliland and Cody Ware. But this was what I got pulled up doesn't show the crew members that were ejected. On your bigger teams, yeah, you can lose that crew member. Even some of the bigger teams that have the war room, even if you lose your crew chief, Kyle Larson's fixing to do that, having lost his right front tire on the track, going to lose his crew chief for 2 weeks. Yes. A team like Hendrick Motorsports, they can cover that. A team like RWR, which just doesn't have the resources and people, and probably doesn't even have a war room like Hendrick Motorsports does. It's going to impact a team like that a lot more. So that goes back to then of you talking about the risk versus reward. Well, HMS, if they get a fine of $100,000, if they have to pay it, they'll pay it. A team like RWR, that could cost them their season because they don't have that kind of resource.
Yes. And then my last one, Jay, and if you've got something else, let me know. But the DVP policy has been changed a little bit as a result of what happened with Kyle Busch and his complaints from Daytona as well. If you remember, he was out of the race earlier than he had anticipated. He thought he could get his car fixed in the garage and get back out. And NASCAR has revised that policy again.
All right, let me find that. I did see something on that of that a new rule change. There we go, affecting the Richard Childress. Overall, honestly, this is one I know they changed from last year into this year to begin with. I don't understand all of it. I am in favor of it, of the fact of just because you go to the garage, you're not out of the race. I am in favor of that. But there were some situations of that there was some confusion in the first two races. And I know they're the super speedway, and there you're talking more about the ability to drive the car back to pit road. From my understanding, if you have to be towed, then you have to go to the garage, do the work there, and come back out. I'm trying to think what was it Cole Custer or maybe Chase Briscoe? One of them I know was pretty adamant of don't let them tow us, make them push us. But there again, if NASCAR's got to make that call.
Yes.
All right, so let me see here if I can read this. A little justified. Okay, so NASCAR updated the language of its rule book to reflect that a driver can only leave the designated work area once before attempting to make minimum speed, which was not the language of the rule book at the time of the Daytona 500. Oh, okay. So it looks like maybe they pulled out of the work area to try and check something, but didn't go out onto the track and then came back to the garage, and that's why.
Yes.
Okay.
So they made
because it says they can't leave the.
Because Kyle's complaint was it's not stated that way in the rule book, and so they clarified that in the rule book.
All right, and and I'm going to try and put
Where
this
did you
into
find
this.
that, Jay? Because I can't put my fingers on it all of a sudden.
J-Ski, NASCAR clarifies damaged vehicle policy in rule update.
Okay, I had it. Now where is it?
So yeah, I see where they're coming from now. I see where they're coming from now. If it was okay, you got one shot on the track to go out and get up to minimum speed, and being around on a dirt track, I can understand that. Of say you do something to the car and you just want to see if it works, and you pull out of the work area in the garage, around in the garage to make sure that piece was right before you go out on the track for your attempt at the time. Whereas now the rule is saying you can only leave the designated work area once. Doesn't say go out on the track to make that minimum speed. So my guess is, they moved around in the garage area, making sure what they had fixed was fixed. And NASCAR is saying, okay, you're done. And they're like, hey, we didn't even go on the track. That's where they changed that to leave the designated work area is the wording change.
Right. Additionally, and previously, if a car was on pit road getting repairs and the time limit expired, a damaged car would be forced to the garage to complete repairs. Now, the rule says repairs can continue on pit road, but will result in a stop and go penalty. So that part is new as well.
And here's where like I said, I don't understand all the rules to it. This is one of those of I can see where any team crew chief got a lot on their plate, and hopefully somebody else has that rule book and reading it on every step they make. Be like, can we do this? Is this right? Overall, the outcome, I am happy with the outcome. Like I said, last year it was if you got towed, you were done for the day. I'm happy that's no longer the case. All these different things of, well, you can do this on pit road, but not this. It gets really confusing. And I understand when you go to, especially some of the smaller tracks, you don't have the work area. I know, Sharon, I've expressed that. I would like to see it like we have at a dirt track. You go off, there's a hot pit area or work area. You go in there, you do whatever you want. You come out, you go at it. Whereas NASCAR doesn't necessarily have that capability, but they apparently do have some type of designated work area, if it's contained to the garage area or these stalls or whatever. But it seems to me, like I said, like there is a lot of different things there that can mess a team up. And I do feel bad about that, but they got some team members there that they're paid big money to make sure these things don't happen, and it's their job to know them. And so if you're in that position, like I said, hopefully you got one team member. That's what he's doing. He's got the book and he's like, okay, that's here. We can't do that. We got to go to the garage, or, we can do that here and not there. That'd be me. If I were a team owner, I'd be like, your whole job is keep reading those rules and let us know if we're breaking them.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what we've said a lot, and that is that NASCAR is ever evolving, and they do listen. Kyle Busch was quite upset when he found out that he couldn't go back out on the track, and he didn't understand why. And so NASCAR gave the clarification here and is saying that once you leave that work area, you go back out on the track and you try to make it work. So whatever he did at Daytona, whether it was to leave the work area to test it out or whatever, and then went back because it wasn't quite what they were looking for. NASCAR said that they aren't going to allow that. So now he's got the clarification in writing, and I give NASCAR kudos in responding to that very quickly.
That's a good aspect to it, and I know on here it says something about the RCR and Richard Childress will feel a little justified. However, it doesn't change what happened to him at Daytona. So yeah, it prevents it from happening again in the future to them or anybody else. But I'm sure they still feel like, well, that didn't help us at Daytona. Now does it? Mm-hmm. I can understand that. I'll give an example of one. I think it was North Alabama Speedway. Normally, if the top three go to the scales and the tech area, that the driver had to stay with the car. The driver and one crew member. Well, they had it where that crew member left. Apparently, and this was again maybe in their minds, like you said, in their minds it was clear, but it's just two members of the team. So yeah, the driver could leave, but then you had to have another crew member come in. It didn't always have to be the same one. So there's a lot of things, and it came about because of somebody happened to have walked away outside a little taped area, and as a reporter covering the pit area, I wasn't allowed inside of it because I almost got somebody DQ'd because I was going in. If I go into near their car, they were going to get DQ'd. So
right.
You got to be real careful about that. Even as a media member you could cost somebody something by being in the wrong spot. But that was one where they definitely needed to be clarification because they said, okay, it just has to be two people, not necessarily the driver. Again, I don't know. I don't remember if the driver had to go to the bathroom or something, but had left the work area or the inspection area. And unfortunately, at that point, the way the rule was, they had to DQ them. I don't know if they did something to make it right and work it out, afterwards, because I know there were some unhappy people. But they changed the way the rule was written and explained to them moving forward. But yeah, that don't take away from this sting away from the one that had it happen to him. I can tell you that.
I hear you. And I feel for Kyle in that regard. But I also give him kudos for speaking up and saying this needs to be clarified because that was needed as well.
Like I said, overall, I like the fact that they did address and change this DVP. I know some fans like the way it was with the time on pit road. I'm a big fan, and I understood the clock and how that worked. Some fans didn't fully understand that. And I think there too, NASCAR looked at that of, okay, we're not going to focus as much on the clock. The teams still have to, but we're not going to, as far as the broadcast, because it's kind of confusing the fans. So while the team still had access to it and were aware of it, it wasn't going out to the fans because it wasn't, it was more confusing to the casual fan than anything else.
Yes. Now, Jay, do you have anything else on your list?
There was one I heard today, and I might want to talk about it in the preview, if not next week's Hot Topics. Phoenix coming up here is going to have the option tire, call it the red letter. Like I said, might want to save it and actually review it next week, but that's one of those this will be the first time at Phoenix, and how it plays into then if they bring it back for the championship race, because we don't know that. It will be used this coming race. Don't know yet about championship weekend, but from what I've seen just overall, I'm in favor of having this option tire and we saw that yesterday at the end of the race. Kyle had older tires. Some of the teams had on fresher tires, and that made the difference. When you have on these softer option tires versus older tires, the more strategies you can get different teams on and when they put them on and how they use them, I think it's a good thing. So I'm looking forward to it, and maybe we'll talk more about it in the preview, but certainly do a recap and how it played out following the race.
Okay, well, I think that's a good teaser for next week's Hot Topic Sound Off segment. Again, 9 o'clock on Monday nights. Jay and I will be here to discuss some of the hottest topics. Unfortunately, we can't get to all of them, but I think we hit all of the appropriate ones for tonight. I do want to remind people earlier tonight, we did do an interview with ARCA Menard Series driver Kyle Keller, and he's with the ARCA Menard Series West. He came in second in their first race in at Kevin Harvick's Kern County Raceway in January, and now their second race is coming up. It's a combination event, ARCA Menard Series West along with the ARCA Menard Series, and Kyle Keller is going to be racing there. We talked to him tonight about that, and he said he's raced at Phoenix 4 times, and he's ready to go back and show what he's got for this race coming up. So keep your eye on Kyle Keller for this weekend. And for that interview, he gave us a really good interview of his experience and how he works and how he thinks. And I asked him to be on our Hot Topic Sound Off here tonight. And he wasn't able to do it tonight, but he said keep him in mind for another time. So we may have Kyle Keller come on and discuss some hot topics with us. I'll see if we can't get him for next Monday night and see how that works out. But
that'd be awesome to have a driver in their perspective involved in these hot topics for sure. I like that.
Yes. You'll have to listen to the interview. He told us a lot of really great things, and I don't have it edited yet and ready to put out, but watch for that coming. It is coming. Also, we've got some other things coming soon. Next week, we will have Hot Topics again here at Fan for Racing Radio at 9 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern time. But also coming soon is just today, we did the live stream. That's going to be out here shortly. We've got the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series COTA reviews. And I told you about the interview with Kyle Keller. But also coming up are our previews for the races that will be taking place at Phoenix Raceway this weekend. Jay and I will be sitting down on Thursday to do those. I'm going to try to get those previews up on Thursday. And then on Friday, everybody late on Thursday or sometime on Friday before that first race starts on Friday. The ARCA Menard Series race is Friday. The Xfinity race is Saturday. And of course, the Cup Series race will be on Sunday. So a lot to look forward to at Phoenix Raceway coming up as well.
It is, and I'm excited. I know I talked to you a little bit of a schedule change for me this week as I got plans for the weekend starting Thursday night to be able to be a part of them. I know normally I only get to do maybe one of them on Friday with you. So looking forward to that, of being able to be a part of all of them Thursday morning before I leave for the weekend. So looking forward to that. Phoenix, good race. A lot of impact, as I mentioned, as it stands right now, and that'll be a hot topic down the road, I'm sure. But this year, one more time at least, the championship race at Phoenix Raceway. So I always look forward to this spring race and kind of see where everybody's at and where we think they're going to be then come the fall when it comes championship time.
Absolutely. That is the key right there, Jay, is that they're testing what happens at Phoenix in the spring, because they're going to come back for that championship race. And so it's not always exactly the same, but they do learn things that they can carry over. So anything else you want to mention before we sign off, Jay?
No, not, and especially not as far as hot topics. Again, tune in next week. We always seem to find some drivers provide plenty, or teams, have to go around and check the water bottles and whether or not they got lead in them.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Jay, let's say our thank you to everybody for tuning in to Fan for Racing Radio here tonight. I didn't see any more comments in the stream, so I'm not sure how many people were listening. I wasn't going back and forth there, but again, we do appreciate you taking the time to listen, even if it's on the podcast afterward. If you do have a thought about what we're talking about here on Hot Topics and want to respond or give your thoughts, there is a comment section that you can do. It's not part of the live stream comment section, but there is a section below the actual stream or the video where you can leave comments, and we'd certainly like to hear what you have to say about our thoughts or the thoughts on the hot topics that we discussed here tonight. So please feel free to leave your thoughts in those comment areas. And with that, Jay, are you going to be? What are you doing this week? Nothing exciting.
Yeah, right. Let's see.
The weekend. Let's put it that way.
Tomorrow, I know I got two. Celebrate Recovery, a church-based, Christian-based group, as well as a Better Man class in the morning as I try and become a better man. That's what most of my week. And then actually Wednesday, I start an Authentic Manhood with our college and career students at church. And then Thursday night, as I mentioned, going on what they call a Emmaus walk. Leaving Thursday night and won't be back till Sunday. No technology, nothing. You're stepping away from the world for those 2.5 days to go out to a camp with some other Christians and really get into the Word of God. So I'm looking forward to that.
So no races for you this weekend. You're going to not be able to see the races until Monday.
Yeah, no, or sometime Sunday, and this is obviously very important to me. I took the week off. I notified Jackson Motor Speedway, and they were very supportive of that, and I appreciate that. And Sharon, I know you have, as far as working with that schedule and working around that as well. But yeah, so yeah, taking the weekend off there. It's weather could be a factor anyway, so I may not miss anything. I hope they get to race. I would not put that on them of just because I'm not there, but I know we got storms coming across, and I'm sure you're on the portion of it as well there in the Midwest of tonight into tomorrow and then possibly into the weekend. So I know Alabama, Tuscaloosa, where I came through today, they were already talking about shutting some things down for tomorrow because it could get nasty.
Oh, boy. Well, I hope it doesn't, because I've got a big day tomorrow. And a big day on Wednesday. I've got a big day every day this week. I'm always busy. My son is actually starting his YouTube channel, and I'm helping him kind of prepare for that. Tomorrow we're going to do a practice session, and then he's going to go live on Wednesday night. And
cool.
Yeah, his topic, though, he's more pop culture kind of stuff that they talk about. He's an author and likes to talk about story structure in movies and TV shows and books and all kinds of things. So he is going to be talking about some pop culture hot topics, if you will. And so you'll want to watch for him, Douglas A. Burton, on YouTube. And if you're into pop culture, they do a lot of conversation there. So I'll be behind the scenes working in this case. So I hope everybody has a great week. I'm looking forward to the previews coming up, and we hope you enjoy all of our reviews, our interview. We finally have an interview here, and the upcoming previews. So take care, everybody, and enjoy your week.
All right. We'll talk to you Thursday.